Wow. You almost get a feeling like, I mean, you look up and you see the cracks. You're almost like, is this really not going to fall on me? So we're standing here in the Cuyahoga Valley. Down below us over there is the Cuyahoga River. You might be able to hear it. And this is what happens when glaciers recede and it cuts away the sandstone from the area, creating this overhang, if you will. But we're not here to talk about the geology of the area. We're actually here to talk about an interesting historical event that happened in this location back in the 1800s, where a young European girl named Mary Campbell was brought to this location by the Delaware natives who had abducted her from Pennsylvania. So, if you're curious, let's take a walk through history. So, I already misspoke during the intro.
Okay.
I said that Mary Campbell was abducted in Pennsylvania in the 1800s. It was actually in the mid-1700s. The plaque says 1759, I believe. All the information that I've read about Mary Campbell says it was 1758. This cave is where Mary was brought after her abduction, probably a few years after her abduction. But anyway, Mary Campbell lived with her family near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and was abducted by the Delaware Indians, the Lenni Lenape Native Americans. And what can you tell us about what happened during that abduction, Megan?
So that morning, that day, Mary was babysitting for her neighbor, Mrs. Stewart. And when Mrs. Stewart came back from her errands, she heard screams and just chaos in her household. And all of a sudden she sees natives running out with two of her children and Mary, and they grab her along the way. So while they're on their way to wherever they're taking Mary, they end up unaliving the baby because the baby was just too much of a nuisance, making too much noise. And then a little while later, the second child, Sammy, who was a young boy, he ended up, unfortunately, being unalived as well. They scalped him. So being Mrs. Stewart, the mother, I can't even imagine how horrified she was at this entire situation.
So the question that I would have for you is, what prompted the Delaware natives to abduct the children in the first place?
So the natives were having difficulty keeping up with their numbers. They were diminishing just so quickly because of all of the fighting and the wars. To increase their numbers, they had to start stealing women and children.
They were repopulating.
Yeah, they were repopulating.
Yeah, that's something that was a normal practice back then, that's for sure. I can't imagine what Mrs. Stewart and Mary are going through at this point in time. They've been taken away from their homes by people they don't know, they don't understand. They've seen two of their party killed already, and they're being hauled away to a life that they know not what to expect from. So,
and being Mary, you have to be terrified at that point because you know, I'm sure that there were stories about what the natives did to people after they were captured. So I'm sure Mary was terrified in the first place, but then having two children just killed mercilessly, and as they're going on their way, like, she must have been like, am I next? Or what's going to happen to me?
So here's where things get a little bit turned in a different direction for Mary and possibly Mrs. Stewart. We don't know what happened to Mrs. Stewart after that. We couldn't find any written record of what happened with her, but as far as what happens with Mary goes, she is, from what we have read, she is taken under the wing of the tribal chief. And he is he's the head of the Delaware tribe, and she is taken into his household and essentially becomes, I would say, probably a daughter to him, and raised as a Delaware native, and learns to become accustomed to the lifestyle. So what is it, what kind of lifestyle do you think she probably had during that entire thing?
Well, there was actually a lot of playing involved. She did have chores, mostly gardening, but there was a lot of playing with her brothers and sisters. They would play games that would actually help them in the future when they became housekeepers or caretakers or warriors. The games were made to kind of hone their skills early on in life. But they were also told stories, and those stories involved supernatural creatures that they were told to stay away from. A lot of, different fun tales, but also tales of the wars and tales of pretty much what they were there to do, the being warriors or caretakers. It was stories about all of that so that it would help them in the future as well.
Mm-hmm. So being raised in that and getting acclimated to that entire situation, I am going to assume she learned the language, learned how to coexist with her new siblings and her new friends, and she became accustomed to life that way and began to embrace it.
Yes.
So the question then is, if all of that happened near Pittsburgh, what is now Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, why did they end up in the suburb of Akron, Ohio, what is now Akron, Ohio, along the shores of the Cuyahoga River in this outcropping? So what happened was, there was another tribe in that area that didn't appreciate the Delaware Native Americans being there. So remember, the Lenni Lenape Delaware Native Americans have been displaced. So they were forced out of their homeland and forced into another Native American tribe's land, which didn't always set well. So that other Native American tribe wanted them out, and they became warlike. So the chief of the Lenape was more than happy to get away, but he didn't know where to go. And he had heard tale that there was open land in the wilderness out west. When they got here, when they finally reached this area, winter fell upon them, and they weren't ready for it yet. But this served a perfect isolation from that weather. So behind you, behind the camera, is south. This way, behind us, is north. And typically in this region, when the cold winter comes upon you, it blows from the north or the northwest. So this would have been a great shelter to be able to stay in and wait out those brutal winter months, which they did. Then after that, and it becomes a lush paradise that it is, they were able to go up top and settle in log houses. These weren't teepees or tent people. They built homes and they farmed the land. And they were above us in what is now, I guess, Cuyahoga Falls. This area, we know for a fact that young Mary Campbell was brought here with the Delaware natives, which makes this a historical site. This means that Mary Campbell is noted as being the first European female in the Ohio Territory. There are also tales of maybe supernatural going on here. What do you know about that?
So there's very little supernatural that goes on here that I've at least read about. From what I've read, people tend to see lots of children that look like Native American children running around and playing their games. They also hear them quite often, like their giggles and laughter. But Mary herself has also been spotted. Just a redhead girl just in the woods doing her thing. And since we've been here, I haven't seen anything like that so far, but except for myself, obviously. But yeah, that's the hauntings of Mary Campbell's cave.
One thing that we forgot to talk about was on the south bank of the river, just right across the river, was a tribe of Iroquois Native Americans. So I'm not exactly sure how well that's set, having two different tribes across the river from each other. It may have been perfectly fine, it may not have been, but for whatever reason, the Lenape decided to head south. Probably because the land was a little bit better for farming in the south. And they actually ended up in what is now Newcomerstown, Ohio, which Netawatwis, the chief, his name literally translates to newcomer. So it makes sense that that would be called Newcomerstown. But yeah, this is a really cool place to be in, knowing the history that this area, this outcropping of rock, this cave, if you will, was the very first known written evidence of a European female making her way to the state of Ohio. So, do you have any parting things you want to say?
Well, as far as what happened to Mary, near the time she was, I want to say it was 7 years later, and she was 12 when she was taken. Around 7 years later, there was a treaty that was signed between the government and the natives, and pretty much saying that they're going to give each other their prisoners back. So Mary actually was taken out of that life and thrown into her old one all over again, not understanding anything that was going on. She had to completely redo everything. And that had to have been so terrifying. And so Mary was incredibly sad at first because she missed her family. She missed her brothers and sisters and the chief, and she missed her old life. And she may have even had someone in mind for a husband at that point in her life. So just being thrown back into her old life and the old ways, it was another culture shock again. So at first she was sad, but a few years later she got married and had 7 kids, and the story has a happy ending, so there's at least that.
Yeah, pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, thanks for that. Nice job. Mm-hmm. Very good. All right, that's all that we have for you today. What do you folks think about the tale of Mary Campbell? Do you think it's an awesome tale? Do you think it's a sad tale? Tell us what you think in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about this tale. And if you are ever in the Akron area, just across the Cuyahoga River, there is the Gorge Metro Park. And we are in the Gorge Metro Park right now on the path. It takes 15 minutes to get here from the parking lot, folks. And it's a beautiful area. And I'm sure John has taken a lot of video and shown it to you as part of this upload. But it's a beautiful place. I urge you to come and visit and pay your respects to this fantastic outcropping. Okay, that's enough from us. Thanks for joining the video, folks. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time as we explore more curious history.
Take care.